is a venture partner at Revel Partners. He's also an innovation consultant. He is also a network leader at Village Global, so very ingrained in the investing space. Previously of StartX, he's a Kaufman Academy, and then also led up the Runway Accelerator, which was acquired, focused on innovation in higher education, where we met years ago. So thanks for joining us, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Was really looking forward to today's conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you're heavily ingrained in the investment community and in the San Francisco area. Wanted to take a step back, and can you share a little bit more about who Revel Partners is and Village Global, and then if you could share a little bit more yourself as an angel, because I know you wear multiple hats. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do that, I kind of wanted to maybe add a little caveat to your comment about being involved in the investment community. And I like to think that I'm involved broadly in the innovation community, but just the community in general. And I feel like to be a great investor and a great person in general, you have to be involved in a lot of different communities, and you have to really be critically, thinking engaging with, and how do you find opportunity and really come with a sense of empathy within all of these different communities. And oftentimes the investors can be a little bit myopic, and which is a natural thing as an investor to invest from your own perspective. But I'm really trying to engage as much as possible with all of these different communities um, as an investor, and hopefully that makes me better at what I do. So to maybe go to the LinkedIn profile, if you will, I'm effectively a venture partner with Revel Partners, which is a $50 million B2B SaaS fund based in New York City and also in Europe. We focus mostly on enterprise and B2B SaaS companies, including marketplaces. So looking at ad tech, martech, prop tech, and quite a few other verticals in the B2B SaaS space. We've done quite a few deals, and I'm really excited to work with the team who has launched really incredible companies like Trade Desk and quite a few other public and companies that have gone through M&As. In addition to that, I am a network leader with a fund called Village Global. Village Global is a fund focused predominantly on global SaaS companies. So there are some exceptions to that. And we have an early stage accelerator program. We just closed the application for the most recent cohort, but if you're looking for a great customized accelerator program with access to people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Reid Hoffman, really high profile luminaries, definitely consider looking out for that program. And then finally, I am an angel investor. I am a limited partner in a fund in Latin America. So I care very much about the inclusion of Latinx voices in the innovation ecosystem. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Love it, love it. No, it shows it true. I know Joe has the entrepreneurship vein. He can't stay still. So involved in multiple endeavors. Can you share a little bit about how you got to? How did you become an angel investor? Can you share a little? Walk us through your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, maybe taking a step back, originally from New York, and I had never been exposed to innovation or entrepreneurship. I guess you could say my dad he started off as a construction worker, and then eventually got into a small family business in the real estate space. So in some sense of the word, he was entrepreneurial, but not in the traditional sense that we think of today in Silicon Valley. So when I came out to Stanford for undergrad, I was exposed to all of these people who had been working on great companies, et cetera. And in fact, in my fraternity in undergrad, I was living living right next to a bunch of guys who hadn't had idea for a startup. And the startup concept was this: to send pictures to each other that just disappeared from your phone. And I remember the first time I heard that, and I completely dismissed it. It was like, I think that's cool, but I'm not sure if anybody's actually going to use it. And lo and behold, months later, it became this rocket ship of the company known as Snapchat. And the idea that somebody with a concept in their mind and great execution could build a meaningful, durable, and sustainable company that positively impacts the world really got me excited. So had a lot of friends that were starting really incredible companies like Periscope and other pretty big brand names that we see today. And I knew I wanted to get involved with that. So my junior year of college, I was part of an on-campus group called SSE Ventures, where we were investing in early-stage startups through Stanford University's nonprofit arm. And eventually we decided to fold that into an accelerator model, which was called SSE Labs. And then SSE Labs eventually morphed into StartX, which is Stanford's main acceleration program, nonprofit acceleration program, focused on helping as many entrepreneurs as possible. So I was there for about a year and a half total, and was one of the early co-founders of the program, which I feel really grateful and excited to be a part of that. Since then, the core ideology or the way that I've approached my career path has been one of intellectual curiosity and diversity. So making sure that I'm doing as many unique and diverse things as possible when I'm starting out, and then eventually getting more and more focused on a core set of skills as I get older. So I've worked at Goldman Sachs in the investment banking group. I was a high school math teacher through Teach for America. I was a software engineer at an education technology firm. So I've done quite a few different things. And I think that diversity and experiences has really lent well to being an impact investor in the past, to also doing the investment work that I'm doing now. So hopefully that's helpful.
No, that was great. Gave a little color as to did you, and I always say it's easier to say looking backwards. Is this what you where you intended to go? Did you say, okay, I'm going to be an investor? It seems like you took that curiosity and it led you in different places, and you feel very comfortable, using that as using your intuition in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And, I think I was always drawn to the idea of being an investor, largely because I had the mindset that as an investor, you could help people become successful with what they're passionate about. And it's the same exact thing as a teacher. And I think being a teacher, maybe a little bit of an aside, being a teacher is one of the most formative experiences for a lot of people. And it also gives them many of the skill sets that lend well to becoming a successful entrepreneur and investor. And I hinted at this before, but empathy, understanding, listening are some of those core skills. But also inspiring and motivating people to build great companies. As a teacher, inspiring and motivating kids. As an investor, I'm inspiring and motivating founders to become successful. So similar skill sets. Did I always know I was going to do it? Not quite. I knew I was interested, and I started building my network quite early on with this community. So naturally, I was kind of drawn to it, and here I am.
And can you share more? That's great to share that background. Can you talk a little bit more about? I know we were speaking before about the communities of color. We talked about being deaf in the venture space. How has that experience been for you? How has that impacted your journey?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, particularly in this rather tumultuous time with with all of the protests going on, I really do want to be mindful of my space and my role in that conversation, and I'm always trying to think critically about how can I better represent my communities, and also ensure that other communities are fairly represented in the conversation. And unfortunately, there are a lot of voices that are left out of venture. And venture, when it started in its early incarnations, was mostly successful white men who wanted to, do something with their spare time besides golf, right? Um, and because of that, we've inherited that typecast for the past 70, 60 years. And we're just starting to crack the shell in terms of changing the investor makeup. And now that's some of the work that you're doing, right? And there are a lot of great communities that are trying to hold firms more accountable for diverse makeups. We're also seeing more of a push from founders saying that they want to see a more diverse makeup within the funders that they're getting funding from. So there's definitely a push and pull. Internally, there's a lot more advocacy for women partners. There's a lot more advocacy for people of color that are being represented within the fund. But the big challenge for me is how can we get minority led funds to get access to the best deals, which is something that I've been pretty actively working on. And then also within traditional funds, if you have a woman partner or a person of color that's a partner, are they actually getting deal making decision power? Or is it just a role that's just for visibility? So making sure that they actually can make those deals is really important. For me, I've done quite a bit of advocacy work and have held a lot of private dinner conversations with fund leaders to ask them specifically, what would it take for you to have a fund that's representative of the entrepreneurial community? A lot of them will scapegoat things like maybe there's not a pipeline of investors, or maybe there's a whole host of reasons that you could tell are clearly cop outs. So by putting them in the hot seat and saying, hey, this is a real serious problem, and we have a unique opportunity to make sure everyone is getting fair access to these investments, and everyone is getting fair access to build great companies. So it comes from within, comes externally through through podcasts and through accountability organization, and it also comes from the entrepreneurs. So uh,
I appreciate.
I feel. Oh yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to say I appreciate you sharing that, because that's exactly what It's I think it's all about dialogue. It's helping us feel comfortable in talking about the things that that are traditionally uncomfortable, right? And just not hesitating to walk into that space. That's what we need, that type of leadership now, of course. So
Uh, yeah, and I'm reading MLK's book, What Comes Next, and he oftentimes talks about the concept that change doesn't come if you're not in that uncomfortable space that you're alluding to. And oftentimes, people want to stay the course and they don't want to, shake the tree or make people uncomfortable, but you kind of need to in order for change to happen. So I appreciate you saying that.
yeah, and if we shift back, what were, it seems, um, for you, what have been some of the challenges in navigating the journey? Seems like you just opened yourself up and said, I'm gonna dive in, and you've made it. But what for those that are still either trying to start their own funds, or just getting out, starting to be an investor themselves, like, can you share some of the challenges you've had and how you've persisted?
Yeah, I mean, it's it definitely hasn't been easy, right? And I do think I'm fortunate that I've had a lot of great people that have supported me along the way. And at the core of it, the most important thing for me is cultivating meaningful relationships that are not just about work and are about fundamentally getting to know people on a personal level. Because when you really know people on that personal level, they'll advocate for you, they'll fight for you, and they'll do a lot more things for you. And I've seen a lot of relationships become incredibly transactional. So that's definitely been helpful for me. Now, what's been challenging, um, I think when I first got started, I was written off a lot. And there's quite a few conversations where you could tell that people weren't taking me seriously because I didn't have the experience, the background, or whatever. But I strategically inserted myself in the conversation. And I oftentimes used mentors or allies to give me that credibility. And I would work with organizations that had brand and credibility already. So that would really help me get into those conversations. The the other thing, and being someone with a disability in the tech community, I feel like I'm fighting my own internal struggles as well. And a lot of communities that are underrepresented have a similar challenge where we're fighting feelings of self-doubt, where we feel like we're not good enough, like we don't deserve to be there, but you do deserve to be there. And I have to remind myself every single day that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be because I'm supposed to be there. And it's really easy to fall into the mindset that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve to be there, um, because of things like microaggressions, because somebody says something funny, or because somebody is making a joke, or because somebody ignored your comment in a conversation. And just constantly reminding yourself that you're supposed to be there is so important. And I still struggle with that every day. And it's definitely a work in progress, but I think I'm my biggest barrier to success, to be honest.
That's a great perspective. Thanks for sharing that that insight. Shifting to how do you feel and I know you did Teach for America, you focused on impact. That seems to be a theme. Can you talk a little bit to the notion of investors that assume impact means philanthropic, or it means conceding on returns? We at Revel1, we abide by, you can make, you can have great returns, and it can be impactful, and those are the two things we look for. But can you talk a little bit more to that? What do you believe? How do you think we can change
Yeah,
the narrative in that respect?
yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of my investments right now tend to be more on the traditional B2B SaaS side, but there is an element of impact in terms of we look at the makeup of the teams that we invest in and really try to make sure that they're diverse and reflective. So that's one version of impact, right? Then there's impact in the sense that these companies are doing more direct, targeted services or programs for underrepresented communities. And then there's kind of that middle triple bottom line type company, which is the companies that they're both having impact, they're getting and generating great financial returns, and they're doing good for the environment. So that's kind of the triple bottom line umbrella, if you will. There's tons of great examples out there. There's more direct to consumer or apparel companies like, Patagonia, for example. Patagonia is kind of like the poster child of a great triple bottom line company. And then you have companies that are, Series B and software companies like Guild Education. And Guild Education is a great example of an impact company that's generating amazing returns. Recently, I did an M&A with a smaller company called Untitled, which is an example of a company that's generating great return, doing good for the environment, and really helping a lot of people at the same time. Are there uh, there's a lot of investors out there who say, well, I love doing this impact stuff, but I need to make money for my limited partners. Now, there's an interesting dance or a nuance that you have to consider there. Limited partners are trying to make as much money as possible. Now, general partners and fund managers are trying to make as much money as possible for these limited partners and themselves. So there's a little bit of a second degree influence in terms of stakeholders and relationships there. But I think if we communicate more and highlight those case studies of successful companies that have done great jobs in positively impacting people and generating returns, we'll start to see a slow mindset shift in terms of what does impact look like. But I also think we maybe need to do a little bit of a reframe in terms of what does impact mean? Does impact mean that we're doing direct impact? Are we positively, is it a slow ship that's moving and we're thinking about internal recalibration of teams? There's a lot of different forms of impact. So that's something I like to think about when we're evaluating investment decisions. That was a long-winded answer, but we are really actively trying to push the final line in the community that you can positively impact people and you can make a lot of money doing it. So that's something I firmly believe with all my heart.
Yeah, and I think Guild Education is a great example of that. And thanks for sharing. And I know you were part of co-founding the Mickelson Runway Accelerator focus on innovation in higher education and career training. Can you share? I want to take a step back and talk about education itself. We've gone through quite a transformation, or I would say accelerated transformation to digital learning because of COVID, because we now we need to. What do you think needs to happen in the space, or what are the trends that you're watching specifically in the ed tech space?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I believe you and I met through, did we meet through the Michelson Runway program?
We did. We met through that. At the time, I was working on access to higher education and creating a platform there. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And that was one of my favorite, impressions of you. And I knew that you had a heart of gold. And I knew that
Thank you.
your mind was in the right place. Yeah, absolutely. So I was, met so many incredible people through that program. And maybe to give a little bit more context, but Michelson Runway was started with the idea that we could generate both positive cash returns and impact by giving people access to persistent through and completion of traditional and non-traditional higher education. And I think the non-traditional piece is even more relevant now, especially as we're having this huge, massive black swan event, which is none other than coronavirus. And I think by virtue of being, people being forced to stay at home and to rethink their daily lifestyle, education is going to become much more of an at-home thing on your own time. It's going to be much more flexible. And we're starting to think a little bit more critically about what does a credential look like? And I think for a long time, education has been about the end result, which is a piece of paper that basically says that you completed this education. That's why AP scores, that's why SAT tests, things that are quantitative and measurable have been kind of the benchmark of what success looks like in education. And we're starting to see a little bit of a recalibration towards progress or process. So how can we rethink the process in a way that it's not necessarily you sit in the seat for 8 hours a day for 12 years of your life and get a piece of paper. Now it's you learn at your own pace, whenever you want, wherever you want. And employers, and this is kind of been the biggest challenge for a long time, is that employers have been intransigent in terms of how they evaluate potential candidates. Historically, they said, if you don't have a BA or a BS from a top university, we're not even going to look at your application in the first place. And that has sent the signal to most of the education system that they need to really focus on. There's pieces of paper that say BA or BS from whatever university. But now a lot of big technology corporations and corporations in general are rethinking what that means. So a lot of them are actually looking at candidates that maybe have an associate's degree, or looking at candidates that have only done community college but have worked for the past 6 years running their mom and dad's family business. So we're starting to see a lot more flexibility from employers. And I think a large part of it has to do with the fact that they're really starving for great talent. So we're seeing a push on both sides. But I think COVID has had a lot of very negative impacts, but I'm optimistic that we will see a lot more inclusion of people that maybe haven't had access to these degrees in the past to get access, to be able to get jobs at Google with just an associate's degree. And I'm quite excited about that. On the flip side, there are a lot of people that don't have the right technology at home. Maybe they don't have connectivity. So I'm really trying to make sure, and really following a lot of groups that have been advocating for more technology at home, for more connectivity of devices. And a lot of the major telecom providers are doing some really interesting initiatives in that space. So long-winded answer, but definitely short-term, maybe pessimistic, long-term optimistic that the education system is going to be much more disaggregated and much more accessible for everyone.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I diving into the space, I think taking a step back, I think there's always this angst, at least for as an education innovator, right? It's like that the K through 12 system or even the higher ed system is not innovating fast enough or as the market needs. But part of my stance has been that those institutions are great. They are what they are. They'll evolve incrementally. That the radical change is going to probably come from outside, and it'll be adapted as needed. Are there any, in terms of radical trends that you see? We talk about the distance learning, the self-paced. What are other examples out there that you've seen that kind of blew you away that you're keeping your eye on?
It's a great question, and I do maybe want to just take a little bit of a quick sidestep, and I think that institutions are generally working exactly how they're designed in the first place, and oftentimes it's the design of the machine that determines where it's going to go in the first place. So you could say the same thing about the criminal justice system, right? A lot of people are lamenting about the fact that we have 2.4 million people in prisons across the United States. It's because the institutions are designed exactly in a way to make that happen. So the education system is, again, designed in a way to yield the outcomes that we're seeing today. And unfortunately, maybe to be a little bit provocative, I don't think that we have the right leadership in our country to design education systems that are fair and equitable and are reflective of the innovation that we need. That being said, I do think that there are a lot of university systems that are incredibly innovative. So for the Michelson Runway program, we worked with the Chief Innovation Officer of the UC and CSU system, and they were quite forward-thinking. The challenge for them is that they had all of these ideas of things that they wanted to do, but lack of an access to funding. So we definitely need a stronger alignment in terms of people, the initiatives that they want to put forward, but also funding. Now, for public universities, funding cycles are on a yearly basis, and they're oftentimes long. and require some type of voting via a ballot initiative. So there's a lot of different stakeholders at play when it comes to big public universities and institutions that maybe privates don't really have to wrestle with. So that's why we're starting to see a lot of more, private universities are much quicker because they don't have to think about all these stakeholders. In terms of other trends that I'm excited about in the higher ed space, and I started touching on this is funding, right? So if you can track where the money comes, you oftentimes can get a sense of where that institution's going. Now we're starting to see a lot more investment and funding coming from what we call income share agreements. Now I'm sure you're quite familiar with income share agreements, but for those who maybe don't know, an income share agreement is quite what the title says. It says that we're going to invest in your education, and we're going to make sure that you get the best job possible. And instead of paying us back with debt, you're going to pay us back by taking a small percentage of your income that you make and giving that as your payback. But if we do a bad job and you don't get a job for some reason, then you do not pay us back. I think that's a great way to align all of the incentives to make sure that we get the end result that we all want, which is people get high quality jobs where they feel passionate and excited. So that's one of the bigger trends that I'm quite excited about.
That's great. So not only it's like innovating on the business model, not only the product or the learning experience. Great. Shifting to what you believe needs to, what do you think needs to happen, or what do you think more is needed to accelerate innovation specifically in the education space today, besides the change in leadership, as you mentioned?
Even more. So I do think that, I kind of touched on this before, the fact that employers are throwing away the traditional criteria for how they evaluate potential applicants and employees is really important, because that sends the signal to the whole higher ed system about what they should be, prepping students for in the first place. So I think that will be one of the biggest force functions for pushing higher ed. Then the other thing is, voting. And I really encourage everybody listening to this, please vote. And I have my personal opinion on what party would be much more innovative in the higher ed space, and what party would be much more reflective of communities of color. So just please vote, because that has a much bigger impact than a lot of us think. Yeah.
Awesome. No, that was great. So no, I thank you for sharing a little bit of your journey, your insight into the innovation in the education space, and especially in higher education, and sharing more about how you got to become an ecosystem builder and an investor. So thank you, Joe, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that you do a great job of creating that space for the conversation, asking the right questions at the right time. So thank you so much for doing this, and for creating this opportunity for myself and for everyone else out there. So looking forward to many more to come.
All right. Thank you, Joe.